3 spine-chilling night drive tales. Discover the sinister secrets of the haunted roads exposed. Emma gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white against the dark leather. After a grueling shift at the hospital, the thrum of her old minivan was a comforting presence in the stillness of Maplewood, like a lullaby lulling her tired mind. Just another late-night drive, she thought. But this time, she veered off the beaten path, opting for Whispers Hollow, the infamous shortcut that locals warned against. Voices echoed in her head. Stay away from there. Yet, with her eyes half closed from exhaustion, she pressed on. The moment she entered the shadowy road, a thrill danced down her spine. The dense trees loomed like sentinels, their claws slicing the moonlight into jagged shards. Emma felt the air thicken, the engine's low rumble swallowed by the darkness surrounding her. As her phone buzzed violently in her pocket, she shot a sideways glance at the screen, heart-racing texts that sent chills to her bones, revealing personal details only someone close would know. Be careful, Emma. They're watching. Who could it be? Panic gripped her as the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, as if 1,000 unseen eyes were boring into her soul. Adrenaline pumping, she accelerated, heart pounding like a tribal drum. Shadows flickered through her rearview mirror, figures flitting between the trees. Was it her imagination? She gasped as the lights outside brightened, illuminating the faces of a group approaching her vehicle. You shouldn't be out here alone, Emma, one of them said with a grin that twisted her gut. How did he know her name? Their eyes glinted with an unsettling familiarity, yet the smiles were a velvet slip knot tightening around her throat. Before she could escape, it hit her these were the faces of neighbors she'd waved to just weeks before. A news spot had reported disappearances in the area. The realization crashed over her like icy water. These weren't just friendly faces, they were predators cloaked in suburban charm. The laughter, once so inviting, turned sinister, echoing ominously through the night. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she sat frozen, the air grew thick with tension, the hum of her minivan turning cold. Their jovial banter turned into whispers, words slipping through the cracks of a sinister conspiracy. Emma's mind raced, piecing together the folklore of Whispers Hollow, a cursed ground where spirits sought vengeance. The road was a sentient being, pulling her deeper into its dark embrace. Taking a deep breath, she jammed the gear into drive and slammed on the gas, but the road twisted impossibly. With every turn, the darkness thickened, suffocating her hopes of escape. Were they leading her to her doom? The laughter morphed into a cacophony of mocking echoes. Emma's heart thundered as she faced a fork in the road, the shadows closing in. Would she manage to escape the tightening grip of this suburban nightmare? Or would she become just another ghost wandering the whispers of the hollow, lost forever among the familiar? Emma's foot pressed harder on the gas, the engine roaring defiantly against the suffocating silence. The headlights carved a narrow path through the stifling blackness, revealing glimpses of those twisted faces, still lurking just beyond reach. They were no longer smiling. Their grins had melted into sinister sneers that twisted the very fabric of safety she'd taken for granted. The road bent sharply, and she barely managed to keep the minivan from skidding off the side. Sweat beaded at her brow, but she could feel the heat of their gaze like a brand against her skin. Just keep going, she whispered to herself, desperation sharpening her focus. It was a mantra as she navigated the shadows creeping ever closer. The path ahead looked worse. Dark gnarled branches seemed to stretch out, trying to snag her as she drove deeper into the hollow. In the rearview mirror, the figures had multiplied, emerging like ghosts from the forest. There was a rhythm to their movement, synchronized and unnaturally fluid, a macabre dance against the backdrop of the night. Emma snapped her eyes back to the road, heart racing far beyond the speedometer. She couldn't focus on them. She couldn't let the terror creep in. Ahead, a light flickered, the weak glow doing nothing to further pierce the gloom. A glimmer of hope, or a trap? Again her instincts screamed at her to flee, but she was trapped in a nightmare of her own making. A derelict cabin emerged from the dark, its paint peeling and the wood warped, an abandoned structure that looked as haunted as the night itself. What had waited here? Would she be safe, or was this another illusion meant to ensnare her? She glanced at her phone again. The screen was lit up with more ominous messages spilling in from the shadows of her contacts. They know you're driving. They won't let you leave. Who was sending these? Was it a warning or a taunt? Her heart raced. She blinked, shutting her eyes for a moment to shake the dread. But as she opened them, something shifted in the reflection. In the rearview mirror, a figure emerged, tall and lanky, looming just a step closer than the rest, shrouded in shadow. Its eyes glowed a disturbing crimson, as if its very essence was forged from the nightmares of the already lost. Emma felt a chill race down her spine, a primal fear clawing its way from deep within. This was no longer just a shortcut. This was a game of chase, and she was the quarry. Suddenly, the cabin door creaked open. A figure stepped out, its movements jerky and disjointed, as if it were learning how to walk again. "Let her in," it rasped, an invitation laced with desperation. Emma felt her stomach twist. Could this be a lifeline or another snare? With a deep breath, Emma wrestled with the decision, the weight of it suffocating. Should I stop? What if it's a trap? But as the figures outside drew even closer, the familiarity of their voices wrapped around her like a noose. She knew she had to choose. Either face the danger that awaited inside the cabin or succumb to the malevolent whispers outside. Control your fear, Emma hissed to herself, but even that felt weak against the encroaching shadows. In that moment, she swerved towards the cabin, the van lurching violently as the tires kissed the gravel. Was she making the right choice, or sealing her fate in this maleficent maze? The door stood open, and as she crossed the threshold, the chilling air hit her, wrapping around her like ice. Emerging from darkness came the giggles of voices, humming a tune. What awaited her inside? She held her breath, entangled in the sinister web that had ensnared so many before her. Would she discover salvation in the cabin, or would it be the final trap that silenced her screams? The door slammed shut behind her, echoing through the cabin like a death knell. Emma jumped, heart pounding against her ribcage. The shadows within shifted, their forms stretching and twisting beneath the flickering light of a solitary bulb hanging overhead. She turned around, her instincts screaming at her not to let her guard down. But where else could she go? "Welcome," the broken voice crooned, slithering out from the figure who had beckoned her. With each word, it felt like the air thickened, tight and suffocating. Emma squinted into the gloom, struggling to make sense of the distorted face. Eyes as wide as saucers, the same crimson glowing light now flickering in the depths of the cabin. What was this place? The walls pulsed as if alive. Scratches and stains marred the surface. Remnants of desperation and tragic stories clung to the wood like a fever dream, brushing against her sanity. Those giggles grew louder, echoing from the walls as if the cabin itself contained the voices of the lost. "Come play with us," the figure grinned, and Emma realized the creature was no longer human. Long fingers curled under the light, twitching in excitement, while those wide eyes shimmered with a hunger one that made her skin crawl. "No," Emma whispered, backing away. The shadows loomed closer, swirling around her like a dark tide. "I need to leave." Panic ignited, fire coursing through her veins as her breath grew quick and shallow. The cabin seemed to pulse with laughter, reverberating off the walls until it became a cacophony. She spun, yanking the door handle, but it wouldn't budge, as if the cabin itself had conspired to imprison her. The figure stepped closer, its laugh punctuated by soft, mocking claps. "You can't escape. We're all waiting." There was a rush of movement behind her, and the darkness nestled deep within the corners came alive. Scuttling, shuffling shapes emerged, their misshapen forms flickering in and out of the light like fireflies drowned in smoke. They circled her, a haunting lullaby spilling forth as they chanted. "Join us forever." Emma could feel the weight of despair pressing down. She had to fight her way out. Finding courage, she swung her fist, connecting with the nearest shadow. It howled, the sound sharp and serrated, sending a tremor through her core. Relief surged as she broke free of their grip long enough to dart across the room. Where would she go? Memories flooded her mind. Home, her daughter's laugh, safety. Was any of it real? The air tasted stale and bitter, and dread wrapped its fingers around her throat, squeezing tighter. She dashed toward a window, praying it wasn't locked, but her fingers slipped against the glass like ice. The giggles transitioned into shrieks, a symphony of voices attacking her thoughts until she clutched her head, fighting against the onslaught. Then she saw it. A rusty lantern perched upon a rickety table, casting feeble light into the abyss of the cabin. Something stirred inside her, an instinct to push forward. If she could reach it, she might illuminate the shadows that threatened to swallow her. With every ounce of strength, she hurled herself across the room, the creatures lunging toward her like a wave crashing against the shore. She dove for the lantern, fingers brushing against the cool metal. Heart hammering, she grabbed it, lifting it high as she turned to face the horror coming for her. Would the light extinguish the nightmarish beings? Or was it too late? Emma took a breath, steadied her shaking hand, and felt the warmth of the lantern pulse through her. The shadows hesitated, and she knew in that instant the truth she had been searching for lurked in the darkness, ready to be unveiled. What would she uncover when she faced their terrifying reality? Would the truth be salvation, or would it plunge her deeper into her impending doom? As the light from the lantern spilled into the corners, the shadows writhed, twisting in frantic patterns. Emma felt the warmth brush against her skin, but it was nothing compared to the icy dread in her heart. With the flickering glow, she saw their true forms, indistinguishable from the darkness around them, spectral faces twisted in despair, desperate minds clawing at her sanity. "Stay with us," they gasped, their breath icy like autumn nights. The figure at the forefront, once seemingly human, now revealed twisted limbs and a gaping maw filled with jagged teeth, all framed by that insatiable grin. Emma's pulse raced as their hollow eyes bore into her, stealing fragments of her courage. "No," she gasped, willing her legs to move. She took a step back, heart racing against her ribs. But the lantern's glow was all but a thin barrier between her and the nightmare. If she was going to face this madness, she needed to wield the light as her weapon. "Join us," they hissed again, but this time in unison, their voices echoing through the cabin like moths drawn to a flame. The ground around her vibrated, as if alive, pushing her back toward the wall. The truth, Emma breathed, and it felt like an anchor in the turmoil. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, she inched towards the back wall, where the shadows crawled like a living tide. She remembered the stories of those who had come before, lost souls who had never left. Maybe, just maybe, she could break their cycle. "Show me!" she cried, raising the lantern higher. The shadows froze, a moment of silence wrapping around her like a shroud. With her heart in her throat, Emma turned the lantern towards the desolate corner where the walls seemed to pulse with unease. Suddenly, light caught on something, a tattered fabric, hanging like a forgotten memory. She moved closer, the lantern's glow revealing a handprint smeared in blood, fresh yet ancient. It outlined a figure, a woman with familiar features, eyes wide in panic, screaming silently across time. Emma gasped, recognizing the face. Her mother? The truth crashed over her, sending icy fingers through her spine. She was one of them. Had she been drawn into this cabin's nightmare? The other shadows stirred, their chant rising, hungry for the new revelation. "She belongs to us," the figures lunged again, their elongated limbs stretching to seize her, the darkness now emboldened by recognition. Emma's pulse quickened. Memories flooded her mind. Everything she'd pushed away. But now, faced with the whispers of the past, she had to confront the darkness within herself. What if the key to escape was to embrace the truth? Stay in the light. She screamed, clutching the lantern as if it were her very life. The shadows recoiled for a moment, uncertainty flickering in their ghostly forms. Then, with a defiant howl, they came at her all at once. The edges of the lantern dimmed, fear clawing at her insides, urging her to flee. The weight of her mother's ghost loomed heavy, promising to drag her down into oblivion. Could she find a way to rescue that fractured past without succumbing to despair? Or would she become yet another lost whisper among the shadows? With nowhere else to go, Emma felt trepidation anchoring her feet, grounding her to the reality unfurling dangerously close. Silence tangled with her breath, and she sensed it, the flicker of freedom hidden in the darkness, yet also the yawning mouth of eternity waiting to consume her whole. The lantern flickered again, its light brightening to provide her one last chance. Would she step forward and plunge into the secrets of the night? All she could do now was leap into the unknown. The shadows surged forward, a howling tide of desperation. Emma's heart thundered in her chest, each beat a wild drum of panic. She clutched the lantern as though it were a tether to her sanity, its glow flickering precariously, threatening to snuff out under the weight of the encroaching darkness. "Stay away," she shouted, her voice raw with fear. The shadows recoiled briefly, and in that moment, she gathered her resolve. She had to know the truth. She had to reveal the past that had brought her here. With trembling hands, she forced herself closer to the tattered fabric. The instant she touched it, a surge of icy energy rushed through her, and she was plunged into memories not her own. Visions flooded her mind, her mother's face twisted in terror, pleading eyes filled with sorrow, the echo of a terrified scream reverberating in her soul. "Emma!" The whisper was soft yet urgent, pulling her deeper into the maelstrom of memories. Shadows writhed around her, clawing for her attention, but the glow of the lantern held the horrors at bay, if only for a moment. The memory shifted. She was no longer in the cabin, but in a dimly lit room, a place that felt familiar yet suffocating. There was a table covered in strange objects, symbols etched in candle wax. Figures gathered around it, obscured by the veil of time. Their faces were lost to her, but their intentions bloomed like malignant flowers. They were lighting candles, chanting words that curled in her ears like smoke-dark, twisted incantations. Emma shook her head, fighting to break free from the vision. "No, this isn't real," she cried. But as she spoke, the shadows around her thickened. They twisted and twirled, forming sinister shapes that reached for her, burrowing memories deeper into her mind. "Join us," they urged, the promise echoing in their sibilant tones. "Become one with the truth." Her resolve wavered. The pain on her mother's face echoed in her heart. Was this darkness her essence? Was the truth a cruel fate painted in shades of despair? "No!" Emma screamed again, and with a burst of adrenaline, she swung the lantern like a weapon, shining its light directly into the oncoming blackness. For a moment, the shadows hissed, recoiling as the light intensified. "Leave me be." Stepping forward, she thrust the lantern into the corner where her mother's handprint still glistened. Images flickered across the fabric, showing her life moments lost to time. Every laugh, every tear, every moment of pain bound in the shadows of that cabin. Her mother's mistakes were etched into those walls, binding her spirit in an endless loop of regret. As the last of the trembling shadows faltered, a piercing scream erupted from the very fabric of her mother's despair. The lantern's light responded with brilliance, illuminating a path through the darkness, pulsating with energy as if it were alive. The chains broke, releasing a whirlwind of anguished voices that screamed for freedom. But in the clash of light and shadow, a monstrous roar thundered through the room. The darkness, enraged, descended upon her with horrifying force. "Embrace us," they clamored, unearthly joy mixed with vengeance. Emma felt the room shift as if caught in a storm, the air thickening, pressing against her chest. In a chaotic swirl of dread, she staggered back, blinking rapidly as shadows rushed forward. "Run, Emma! You have to run!" The echo of her mother screamed, desperate and full of pain. With the lantern flickering dangerously low, she spun around, sensing the gravity of what lay behind her and what loomed ahead. Desperation clawed at her throat. Could she break the cycle? Or was she destined to follow? Adrenaline surged as she dashed towards the door behind the shadows. But the shadows whispered with a cold promise. You can never leave. Emma's breath caught in her throat, each step tainted with growing dread. Just beyond the door lay her uncertainty. Would she find freedom? Or was it another trap waiting to ensnare her? Emma burst through the doorway, the shadows lunging at her heels like ravenous wolves. The moment she crossed the threshold, she felt the air shift again, as if the very atmosphere conspired against her. Her heart raced, a frantic drum echoing in the silence of the next room. She stumbled into a narrow hallway, the walls lined with dusty portraits. Eyes seemingly followed her, their lifeless gazes filled with accusation. Emma shivered, the cold dread creeping back up her spine. Every breath felt like an intrusion. She had to keep moving. The sound of whispering filled her ears, a cacophony of voices rising and falling like waves. Turn back. You belong to us. It beckoned her, distorting her very thoughts, pulling her toward the darkness. Fighting through the chanting, she pressed on, her lantern flickering weakly as if sensing her fear. I won't give in, she shouted, her voice loud against the whispers, though doubt gnawed at her resolve. She could almost see her mother's terrified face in the flickering light, urging her on, telling her to escape while she still could. As she reached the end of the hallway, Emma hesitated. A door loomed before her, carved with intricate designs of twisted vines and eyes that blinked against her will. She knew, instinctively, that whatever lay beyond it wasn't just another room. It was a threshold, the final barrier between her and the truth, a truth that throbbed like a living thing. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open. It groaned, hinges protesting the intrusion as she stepped inside. The air thickened, suffocating and warm, crawling across her skin. The room was a shrine of chaos, a cluttered amalgamation of candles, books, and unrecognizable symbols mixing like an artist's palette of horror. In the center, a table stood bare, with a deep black substance pooling on its surface. It glistened like a black hole, and within it, visions bloomed like grotesque flowers. Shadows danced around her, alive and thrumming with a terrible energy. Her breath quickened as the darkness swirled, showing flashes of her family, her mother, her grandmother, faces racked with fear, bones creaking under the weight of secrets. Each blink pulled her deeper, intertwining their fates with hers. Emma, the voice was unmistakable now. Her mother, chilling and enchanting. It beckoned her from beyond the abyss. You must choose. Choose? What could she possibly choose? The shadows circled her like predators, hissing and brandishing their claws, filling the room with the scent of raw despair. Join us, become part of the eternal night, they whispered in unison, their voices merging into a single haunting melody. Emma felt the room pulse with malevolence. The weight of her ancestry pressed heavily atop her shoulders. If she didn't confront the truth, would she be swallowed entirely by the darkness? No, Emma cried, straining against the power that sought to pull her in. I choose to fight. I choose to break free. The shadows wailed in fury, a sound so profound it rattled the very bones of the house. The black substance in the center of the table began to bubble and churn, revealing a visage that morphed into the face of her own mother, twisted in anguish and rage. Emma, help us. Don't let them take you. The eyes glinted with tears, mirrors reflecting the horror she was about to unleash. Suddenly, the lantern flickered violently, flaring brightly for a moment before dimming again. Emma was losing her grip. With a final burst of will, she lunged for the table, the lantern raised high. But as she did, the shadows surged ahead with a terrible roar. In that breathless moment, the shadows lunged toward her, and somehow, Emma understood. The fate of her family hung precariously in the balance, and she was the vessel to either condemn or liberate them. The choice had to be made before she was lost forever in the grasp of the lurking terror. As darkness encircled her, one chilling question emerged in her mind. Was it too late to save herself and her family? And then silence fell like a curtain. The stillness was oppressive, wrapping around Emma like a suffocating shroud. The last echoes of the shadow's roar faded into an unsettling quiet, punctuated only by the faint drip, drip, of the black substance on the table. The darkness pressed against her, coiling tightly, and for a moment, she stood frozen, heart hammering as countless questions spiraled through her mind. Emma's fist clenched around the lantern as she fought against the creeping despair. She had to make a choice, but what could she possibly offer in return for the salvation of her family? The weight of their plight was a gnawing hunger, an unbearable tightness in her chest. Emma the voice, a perfect blend of heartbreak and hope, reached out to her again. It was her mother's voice, but it wasn't just a sound. It was a living thing that wrapped around her, urging her to remember. Suddenly, the lantern flickered once more, the light casting monstrous shifting shapes against the walls. The black substance on the table began to transform, drawing tighter into a frame, revealing flashes of glimpses of family gathering, laughter lost, a terrible fire, faces twisted in pain. Each vision struck like a dagger, each memory a hook dragging her closer to the writing shadows. Choose to save us, Emma. Embrace the night, the shadows murmured, their voices laced with desperation, clawing at the remnants of her strength. But she was tired, exhausted from the fight, from the emotional tidal wave crashing over her. I can't, she sobbed. I want to give up. The moment she declared her rebellion, the shadows shrieked, their voices splintering, resonating through the room, filling it with rage. Her mother's visage seemed to dissolve in front of her eyes, swirling like chiaroscuro, a haunting vortex pulling her thoughts into the depths. In that twisted reality, she sensed the truth unfurling itself, a dark legacy, a lineage wrapped in curses and binding pacts. The sacrifices a steep toll for power and protection. Images fragmented and wound together, each like a cruel reminder of the history she never asked for. I can't trade their lives for my soul, Emma shouted, her voice breaking, desperation shuddering in her words. She felt a spark of clarity, a gut-wrenching realization that shot through her like ice. And then the room trembled, the shadows recoiled, a rippling discontent that spread through the dark, drawing closer. Emma felt the pull of something cold and malevolent at her back, a force she hadn't noticed before, an entity lurking behind her, its presence prickling the back of her neck like 1,000 tiny needles. Emma, it was her mother again, but this time it was different. The voice sounded distorted, more sinister. We waited. You must accept the darkness. No, I want to let you use me, Emma screamed, turning on her heel. But the shadows twisted, and she stumbled back, eyes wide, as she saw a figure emerging from the darkness behind her. It wasn't purely her mother. It was something else, something worse. Swathes of darkness coalesced, forming a shape that reached for her with elongated fingers, twisted and grotesque. The lantern flickered again, and for a moment, the horrors of the room faded, revealing an unsettling clarity in her vision. In that heartbeat, a desperate decision struck her. A way to fight back, to harness the darkness instead of surrendering. What if the shadows were both her enemy and her strength? Emma leaned into the flickering light, the blackness swirling chaotically around her. She gathered every ounce of courage. She would confront the darkness, not as a victim but as a warrior. With a steady voice, she shouted, I choose to confront you. I choose my path. The shadows howled, a chorus of rage and fear that shook the very core of the walls, straining against the very light she wielded. Would it be enough? The moment hung in the air, thick with impending dread, as the black substance began to surge, threatening to engulf her in its abyss once again. What price would she have to pay to escape? The shadows writhed and lunged, a dark tide rushing toward Emma, eager to swallow her whole. Her heart thundered in her chest, a wild drumbeat of fear and determination. She could feel the oppressive weight of their malice as the air thickened around her, each breath a struggle against the choking darkness. She squeezed the lantern tighter, willing its light to burn brighter, to pierce the thick, swirling gloom. It flickered but steadied, the golden rays reaching out like fingers, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. For a fleeting moment, hope flickered alongside the lantern's flame. Fight, Emma commanded herself, even as doubt gnawed at the edges of her mind. The memories paraded before her, twisted images of her family consumed by the fire, their faces shimmering in the darkness like ghosts wailing for salvation. Each memory was an anchor, pulling her closer to despair, but also awakening ancient rage stirred deep within her. Release them, she screamed, the word echoing against the spectral walls. The figure behind her hesitated, its twisted fingers curling slowly, as if considering her demand. A heartbeat passed, then another, and she felt a surge of power ripple through her veins. Leave my family alone, she bellowed, her voice strong, vibrant against the void. Emma felt their presence, her mother, her father, trapped within, longing for escape, longing for her to fight. The lantern's light pulsated, shining with an intensity that pushed back against the shadows. An agonizing scream ripped through the air, a sound like shattered glass that sent Emma reeling. Twisted like a whip, snapping just above her head. The darkness rippled again, and she faced the grotesque figure that loomed behind her. It flickered between something familiar and a monstrous aberration. The maw opened, and she heard whispers flood out, a cacophony of torment. You belong to us, Emma, you cannot escape the pact. They are merely pawns in our game. No, she didn't recognize her voice, but it felt like an ancient roar escaping her lips. I am not your pawn. I'll end this cycle. Suddenly, an echo erupted through the room, like a volcanic eruption of sound. The walls shuddered, and the shadows wailed in a chorus of fury and pain. Their mass began to recede, scrambling back as if her sheer will surprise them, catching them off guard. Emma saw her mother in the whirl, her face appearing clearer, eyes wide with desperation and pride. The ghosts of her family, their faces etched with anguish, urged her on. It was a moment of fragile hope, but it was a moment nonetheless. With every pulse of the lantern, a memory lit up. The family dinners, laughter echoing through the halls, warmth radiating from her mother's embrace. You have strength, they seemed to say. Use it. As if fueled by their whispers, the light surged again, forcing back the darkness, pushing the grotesque figure to the edges of her vision. Clarity bloomed within her, and she reached deep inside, summoning the remnants of her ancestry, the bloodlines forged in combat against shadows before. Emma thrust the lantern forward, determined to take a stand. I will not be made a victim. I accept this darkness as my strength. At that moment, an eruption of sound rocked the room, the very foundations trembling. The walls warped, and reality felt thin. Through the chaos, shadows shrieked, "You will regret this, Emma." The threat echoed, chilling her to the bone. And then, in a blinding flash, she felt the force of the darkness collide with her light. It was a fierce battle, a clash of elements that sent shockwaves through her being. Her defiance had ignited something old, something wrathful within the shadows. What had she truly unleashed in her rebellion? As the ground trembled beneath her, and the lantern began to flicker dangerously low, the final echoes of the shadows whispered a dark promise that clawed at her heart. This wasn't over. What horrors awaited her next? The shadows convulsed violently, as if Emma's defiance had scraped open an ancient wound. The air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. Each breath she took heavy with dread. A cold sweat beaded on her forehead, trickling down her temple as she fought against the encroaching darkness, the flickering lantern in her grasp and frail beacon amidst the night. Stay away. Her voice rang out, barely masking the tremor beneath. The grotesque figure before her twisted, its face a nightmarish blend of familiar features that taunted her. Whispers clawed at her mind, scraping against the walls of her sanity. You're strong, but not strong enough. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The shadows pulsed, undulating like a living entity, whispering desires and fears that she never wanted to hear. The specters of her family hovered in the margins of her vision, faces contorted in silent screams, urging her to push forward, to fight back. Emma channeled her fear into rage, clenching her fists until her nails dug into her palms. I won't let you take them. Not now, not ever. Each word propelled her forward, each shout resonating with the echoes of her past. The lantern flickered, casting flares of light that danced wildly against the darkened walls. But doubt gnawed at her resolve. A chilling whisper lodged in her mind. What if the shadows were right? What if she was just prolonging their torment? Foolish girl, the figure crooned, leaning closer, its breath a fetid gust that sent chills racing down her spine. You think you can fight fate? There's a darkness within you, ready to embrace the void. No, Emma shouted again, each syllable sharp and cutting through the thick atmosphere. She needed to focus, to center herself. In that unsettling moment, she recalled her mother's voice, calm and filled with warmth, teaching her how to overcome fear. You always have the light, she used to say as they sat beneath the night sky. Emma called that light to her, reaching down deep into her soul. Damn you, she screamed. With a primal roar, she thrust the lantern forward, its light bursting forth like a tidal wave. The shadows recoiled, hissing and retreating, flaring against the brilliant glow. For a brief, precious second, clarity reigned as she held her ground. But then, the ground shook violently as sinister laughter erupted around her, filling the space with cold, biting reminders of her ultimate fragility. You can't fight what you've already lost. Your family is gone, just like you. The lantern sputtered, dimming against the malevolent tide. Emma felt the familiar pang of despair claw at her insides. Panic surged. She couldn't lose now. Not after everything she had already faced. Throwing caution to the wind, she dropped the lantern, letting the darkness swallow it. Her heart pounded as she plunged into the pitch blackness without the guiding light. She could feel the shadows closing in, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. But she forced herself to recall the memories, the laughter, the warmth, the love, each one a flicker of hope. Then came a voice, crystalline and strong, cutting through her despair. Her mother's voice. Your strength is not in the light. It's in your will to survive. With newfound resolve, Emma embraced the enveloping darkness instead of fearing it. With a raw, unyielding force, she screamed, I'm not afraid of you. The air trembled, and she felt the shadows recoil in shock. She hadn't just accepted her fate. She had become one with it. What had once threatened to consume her now surged inside her, twisting into a powerful energy. But as the shadows began to dissolve around her, a new sound flooded the space, a faint, eerie echo of familiar laughter, warped and unsettling. It clawed at her senses, a cruel reminder that not all shadows were gone. What now, Emma? It taunted, a twisted grin forming in the void. Are you ready to face the truth? Her stomach churned as the laughter swelled, and darkness loomed, hinting at even worse secrets to come. Emma's heart raced. What truth waited for her behind those whispers? In that darkness, she realized she was still not alone. What monstrous figures lurked just beyond her perception? The oppressive darkness pulsed around Emma, thick and suffocating. Her heart beat wildly in her chest, a frantic drum signaling the fight that had become a dance with death. Even without the beacon of the lantern, something deep within her stirred, a raw instinct pushing her forward into the unknown. With each step, the familiar echo of laughter twisted menacingly, wrapping around her like chains. You think you're free? You are ours. The shadows wailed, a cacophony blending into an unnerving symphony meant to shatter her resolve. Yet Emma held on tight to her memories, those fleeting glimpses of love, of joy, of warmth that now felt distant. Each memory pulsed with life, a reminder of who she was, and that ignited something fierce inside her. She pressed deeper into the void, her body a whirlwind of trepidation and determination. I won't let you control me, Emma screamed, her voice reverberating in the thick air. Suddenly, around her, the darkness shuddered, as if disturbed by her fierce declaration. Among the shadows now emerged glimmers of broken memories, flashes of family gatherings, laughter ringing through the air, her mother smiling at her, holding her close. You carry the light within you, her mother whispered, a calm voice cutting against the torrent of despair. Fueled by anger, sorrow, and a potent resolve, Emma summoned that light again. She felt it blooming, igniting her very core. She shouted out, "I choose to stand against you. I embrace all of me, my history, my pain, my strength." The shadows writhed in response, a howling mass of confusion and rage. Emma could sense the shift, how the darkness recoiled slightly, and a path emerged amidst the chaos, a flicker of light illuminating her pathway. It was a chance for escape, a breath of hope. With all her might, Emma charged toward it. She didn't just run. She surged forward, uprooting the weight of fear that had gripped her for so long. She could feel the shadows clawing at her heels, but she pressed on, determination blazing bright. "Emma!" The voices swirled around her, desperately reaching for her as the thread of her past began to unravel. But she pushed through, one foot after the other, until she burst through a thin veil, light flooding her vision as she stumbled into an open space. The sudden brightness struck her like a physical force, but it wasn't blinding. It was warm, enveloping her like a long-lost embrace. For a fleeting moment, she felt her mother beside her, and she breathed deeply, inhaling peace like honey. But the shadows lunged at the edge of the light, their claws scraping and reaching, a low growl echoing behind her. "You can't escape our truth," they roared, voices intertwining with desperation and fury. Emma turned, heart racing. She could feel them drawing closer, their cold breath inches away. But she stood firm, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. "I am my own truth," she shouted, and the resonance of her voice shattered the darkness, an echo so powerful it rippled through the shadows like a shockwave. Suddenly, as if the weight of her declaration pierced the fabric of the nightmare, the shadows convulsed. She could see the faces of those lost within her ancestors, trapped within their own despair. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about breaking the chains forged by fear that bound them all. In a strength fueled by love, she raised her arms toward the onslaught of shadows. "You will not take me. You will not have them. We break free today." The lantern flickered abruptly, igniting once more at the heart of her conviction. Radiant light streamed forth, casting away the darkness as if it were mere smoke in the presence of a flame. "Join me, all of you," she cried, and in a breathtaking moment, something swelled within her, something ancient unlocking deep in her soul. The shadows screamed, writhing as the light enveloped them, dispersing the heaviness that had saturated the air. They were forced backwards, their twisted forms dissolving, revealing at last those they had ensnared for generations. In the distance, Emma could see the release of lost souls, memories of laughter intertwining like the beautiful strands of a tapestry now complete. Her heart soared. This was her victory, a collective liberation from the suffocating grasp of despair. With one final surge of determination, she took that light, now palpably hers, and thrust it out with all her might. "You do not belong in me. Be gone." The eldritch figure howled, its form evaporating into wisps of shadow. In an instant, a shattering, exhilarating release. Emma felt the shackles break. Energy washed over her like a tidal wave, drowning the shadows in brightness. As silence enveloped the space, Emma closed her eyes, triumphant, feeling the warmth of her family surround her in a radiant embrace, lifting her above the darkness. Finally, she opened her eyes, standing amidst the remnants of her journey. She was back on the road, her minivan intact, the night seemingly sober once again. Whispers Hollow was just a memory now, a shadow behind her. Freedom coursed through her veins as she whispered, "I am not just a memory. I am here." The weight on her chest lifted. She finally felt whole. With one last look into the darkness behind, she smiled and whispered, "Thank you." And she drove on, leaving the hollow far behind, shedding the chains of the past, merging into the night, ready to embrace the future. As the tail lights blinked off into the distance, a wake of hope remained, whispering on the air. Now, if you want more spine-tingling tales filled with victory and hope, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep the light shining bright. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. I want to hear all of it, every thought, every emotion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. They deserve to feel the power of hope alongside you. This is the moment to show your support. Join us as we journey together into the depths of storytelling.